if I put on a hypothetical Russian hat, the first thing I do is I say, this is strategically the right direction the U.S. should be heading. A pragmatic, realistic foreign policy that finally recognizes that Russia's not the enemy. There are things in this document that would be disturbing to the Russians, of course. Um, the whole Monroe Doctrine concept, uh, puts Russia in a difficult spot vis-a-vis Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and same thing with China getting involved. Um, but all in all, it's the right direction. But then I say, well, yeah, but um, come November, Trump's got midterm elections. Is Trump sustainable as a political force? I mean, how much credence do we want to give a document that could be undermined, in terms of policy implementation after November if a new Democratic controlled House were to be empowered? Then Trump would find himself in a repeat of his last 2 years of his first presidency: impeachment, 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 impeachment. It would be the end of the Trump presidency. And then there's no guarantee about, is J.D. Vance going to be able to replace Trump? That becomes problematic. So I'd be careful there. Then, you know, if the Republicans or pro-Trump Republicans can retain control of the House and the Senate, that becomes different but even then, you have to say, is J.D. Vance electable? Is Donald Trump just a unique phenomena that once he's off the ballot, is J.D. Vance electable? Or are we going to get a throwback? And so I would say that the Russians really can't get too excited about this document until 2028, um, and see what happens in 2028. Uh, in the short term, though, I think it shows Russia that they are on the right path when it comes to Ukraine. That as opposed to their reticence about, a ceasefire, et cetera, alienating the Trump administration, it's only compelled the Trump administration to recognize pragmatically, the Russian reality. And that appears to be what Trump has done. And so if I were the Russians, I would be cautiously optimistic about this document. But you also have to remember that it was the Trump administration that lied about, Russia cheating in the INF treaty, pulled out of the INF treaty. Trump lied about the JCPOA and pulled out of that agreement. The United States can't be trusted. Even with Trump going in this new direction, I think the Russians will always hold back a little bit because is this the truth? Or is this just, a short-term act designed to, assuage a certain political reality, which once those ruffled feathers have been soothed, you'll see Trump change course again. Is Trump a trusted interlocutor? Is the United States a trusted interlocutor? And right now, the answer in Russia is a decisive no to both.
Yeah, I think many still remember that reset button, which meant nothing. so there is a lack of trust, of course. But
Well, it meant more than nothing because it wasn't just a mistake. The reset button was subterfuge because the policy was regime change. They weren't seeking to reset relations with Russia. They were seeking to keep Vladimir Putin out of the presidency. They were seeking to empower Medvedev so that Medvedev would block Putin's return. They were seeking the demise of Vladimir Putin, the empowerment of Medvedev, with the hopes that Medvedev could be brought into line a la Yeltsin. So this wasn't a reset. This was a redefinition. This was regime change. And the Russians know that. This wasn't a simple mistake. There's a difference between people executing bad policy. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, but this was deception on the part of the United States, outright deception, with the most nefarious intent to collapse, um, Russia as it had emerged under the leadership of Vladimir Putin and to return Russia to the decade of the 1990s. And that's deeply insulting to the Russian people. who remember what the reality of the 1990s was.
Yeah, I feel like for the younger audience, they should know that because now when you see Dmitry Medvedev, he's very hawkish and he's the pit bull essentially that yeah, plays the bad cop almost to Putin. But I remember when I lived in Russia in 2011, 12, when a lot of Russians saw him as Medvedev as being weak because as this was seen in the West as well, he was seen as a bit soft, liberal, a bit very pro-Western, someone you can bring on board, which is a testimony, I guess, to how the relationship has been mismanaged. If you see the fury and the anger that he carries with him now towards Europe. But how does this national security strategy translates into the end of the Ukraine war? What would you do if you're Zelensky reading this document? Because it does seem as if yeah, there's that the US is now ready to completely wash its hands with with Ukraine. Of course, as you said, it could be an act as well that is to simply put pressure. But assuming that it does reflect the genuine ideas of the Trump administration, what would you how would you think that this would impact Zelensky's government?
Fatally. This is the end of Zelensky. He can't survive without American support. There's some critical things happening or getting ready to happen in Ukraine that are related to the budget. And, if Ukraine can't find a way to gain access to, 120 to 150 billion dollars in the short term, there will be a political crisis of existential proportions, which Zelensky may not survive. Um, so right off the bat, you have this reality, an economic reality, which becomes a political reality. You layer over that the fact that the Ukrainian army is just being routed on the battlefield. Every day gets worse, and it's not going to change. It's not going to reverse. Um, Zelensky, instead of doing the smart thing, which would be to go to Trump and say, "Forgive me, Daddy. The prodigal son has returned, and I'm here to do whatever Daddy wants to make this war go away." Um, he instead is aligning himself with the Europeans, who Trump just declared war on through his national security strategy document. Um, and all the Europeans are doing and continue to support Zelensky is prove Trump's point that they don't care about, the things that America cares about. We don't want more war with Russia. We want stable relations with Russia. And yet Europe is becoming, a war party collective. And Zelensky appears to be aligning himself fully with that, rejecting outright some of the core demands made in the peace plan that Trump has put forward. Um, I don't believe this will endear him to Trump. And I think that you're going to see that the United States is going to increasingly cut its ties with Zelensky. And in doing so, empower the Russians to continue their military advance unfettered by American political or economic interference. And you're going to also find out that Europe can't live up to its promises, that anything they say about supporting Ukraine is empty, because ultimately Europe can't do anything of fundamental value without the support of the United States. And we won't support European policies that continue to push for, endless war with Russia.